So we just had our World of Warcraft showcase for the 35th anniversary of Blizzard, where they primarily went over the retail roadmap and went over some of the things we're going to be seeing in this next year for World of Warcraft, going into Midnight and all of the upcoming patches. And one of the really interesting things they revealed is a new piece of content or game mode specifically for delves. And I've really enjoyed running delves since they've been added into the game. They've added a lot of additional content. Even though I'm somebody that does do other more hardcore endgame content, delves have been really good, especially for alts and also farming different things you would normally expect. Like delves have been super good for farming specific resources, for getting some cosmetics, and for actually just farming gear for your alts. And I think the system in general has been a massive success, and it seems like they're going to be introducing kind of the next evolution of delves, and they're currently calling these Labyrinths. And right off the bat, keep in mind that this is going to be introduced in 12.1.5, so probably like 7-8 months after the release of the expansion, we will finally be able to play Labyrinths. So these aren't going to be like a launch feature for Midnight, but it sounds like the wait will be worth, because these are kind of being described as a mega dungeon version of delves, but based upon some of the things they showed, which is like early artwork and a planned out map of one of these, they almost seem like a delve raid, which is actually super interesting. And the kind of synopsis of these is that they're going to be much longer, much more substantial, much more involved delves that are also going to have a different reward structure from normal delves. And I think that actually points to them having greater rewards than you can get in normal delves. So potentially maybe getting like hero track out of these, and maybe being able to get like a myth track out of your Great Vault. That one may be a little bit too crazy depending on how difficult these are, but I would not be surprised if you'll be able to just get hero track out of these labyrinths. And they do give a bit of an explanation of these. So we're introducing a new content type. To support the passionate community around delves, we want to add more flexibility and experimentation. For those who love delve gameplay but want something more than bite-sized experiences that are currently offered, we're adding a new feature that we're currently calling Labyrinths. That is a really good name. I honestly hope they keep it as well. These are inspired by mega dungeons. They are large, sprawling experiences that you can tackle all at once or a bit at a time, depending on your own schedule. I think that one's pretty important. More than likely, these are going to have like a lockout feature that you could probably just go outside of the delve like normal and reset it if you want to do that. We don't know how the rewards are going to work. Maybe it's like once a day or once a week or something like that, but being able to kind of do it chunk by chunk is pretty nice as well. That's also probably what's going to make it feel much more like a delve raid than like a delve mega dungeon. And they will have a different form and reward structure than are currently available in delves, but retain the core elements of exploring and besting foes alongside your delve companion, so you still will have a Valeera with you. Now, some of the theories around this is that this is going to be maybe more of a roguelike system. Like, you already have a little bit of that in delves where they're using basically the same UI and system that was introduced in Torghast when you get a lot of the powers or go defeat some of the rares and you pick up that power. So maybe they will introduce more of that, and whether or not they do that, just having like rares or the different power-up treasures and stuff that we have in delves right now in a much longer, much more substantial delve will actually be much more important. Like, if they made this a much higher difficulty than the delves we have now, that's much longer with like tons of objectives and bosses in the one labyrinth, going and defeating like a rare in there or picking up a treasure that just gives you a buff or a new effect for the entirety of the run, that'll be absolutely massive for these new labyrinths. But there is also just a possibility that they go more towards Torghast, have it more of a roguelike system. I'm not sure if they'll do that, but they did also mention wanting to experiment more, so that may be a possibility that this is like a roguelike adventure within this labyrinth. But that does also bring up that a lot of the things we see in delves right now are kind of really short-lived because of how short delves generally generally are. Like a lot of times I'm running delves, and I know for a lot of other people who are running delves, you're not usually going to go out of your way to pull a bunch more enemies to go defeat like a rare in the delve you're running, unless you think you need that power increase or it's just going to make the full run faster, or maybe you're a bit weaker and think I need this to defeat the boss at the end or something. Usually you just kind of skip them because again, unless it's going to make the overall run faster, it's probably not worth going and defeating that rare that has a ton of health to get their special effect they give you. So a lot of times you just skip them. A lot of the times, unless there's like a treasure directly in your sight that you can go get that gives you another one of these powers as well, you're probably not going to explore around to try to get every single one of those. So there is just a bunch of stuff that in delves right now, and just kind of general gameplay of how players use this, a lot of these things are generally just skipped. But if you're in a much longer labyrinth that can maybe take hours upon hours to complete, that maybe has a much higher difficulty ceiling, getting all of these different little buffs or effects or go defeating rares or exploring the whole thing could potentially actually be something you want to do. Because if you're starting off a labyrinth run and these are going to take hours upon hours and they're much more difficult, you're going to explore everywhere because you could potentially find a rare or a chest at the start of one of these labyrinths that gives you like a really good buff, and now you're just much stronger for that run. And I think that adds an element of exploration that I think is kind of missing in delves right now because they're so short and so bite-sized. And another thing that is pretty interesting, not specifically because of labyrinths, but just because of now having labyrinths being introduced into the game and also having the prey system coming with the expansion launch, it seems like outdoor content, which delves are still considered, it seems like they're very much trying to add more to that. What I'm really hoping is that they're trying to add more challenge and more endgame opportunities to that, because right now you basically only have delves. You have the other outdoor stuff, you have world bosses, and you have like some of the weekly objectives and stuff that can get you a okay-ish item level and gear track gear, but that's only kind of starter gear. Then you go into delves, and doing the highest tier delves, you can get hero track gear only out of your vault. So those are kind of for alts or for early gearing and stuff like that. If you do any other endgame content like Mythic Plus or raiding, you're generally going to upgrade a lot of that gear pretty quickly outside of the odd super overtuned trinket. So what I'm really hoping as they introduce more of these systems that make outdoor content more difficult is that they are continuing to make it more difficult past the difficulty of delves we have right now, which will also add in higher tiers of endgame gear. Again, it would be really cool if in Labyrinth you could do the highest difficulty of it and get hero track gear out of the labyrinth itself, and also be able to get myth track gear out of your vault. And while it's said this system is inspired by mega dungeons, I do hope they also take some big inspiration from raids in general. Obviously, you could still do this completely solo, so you couldn't have like full-on raid bosses, but I think mega dungeons were starting to be pretty heavily inspired by raids as well. Like the last one we had, Dawn of the Infinite, was the first time in World of Warcraft that I felt like a 5-man dungeon kind of felt like a raid. I'm hoping they're kind of trying to do the same thing with Labyrinth and kind of trying to make this like a raid for delves. And the final thing I want to go over is an image they showed during the live stream that's essentially a like work in progress map layout of what a labyrinth could look like. And this is really interesting because there are 9 separate rooms that all look pretty massive. So first off, you have entrance that's labeled 1A. It looks pretty big, and presumably all of these different labeled sections, which there's 9 of, will probably have some objective or something you have to do in it to unlock different areas it connects to it. So 1A connects to 3 different areas. It connects to the central chamber, which is 2B, which connects to basically every other room, but it also has side areas that connects to 2A and 2C. So it's also pretty interesting that it seems like with this first one, at least, they're trying to make it so you can kind of go wherever you want once you unlock, say, the central area. But then presumably after going entrance 1A, you would go central chamber 2B, which is a big circle that connects to basically everything else. So after 2B, you could go 2A. Maybe you would have to go 2A first, but let's say you go from the entrance to the central chamber, which kind of makes more sense. You then can go over to the left. You can go 2A. 2A, as I mentioned, connects to the entrance 1A. It also connects to 3A, which looks to be a pretty big room. Then you go up above that. You have 3B, which seemingly only connects to the central chamber of 2B. It may connect to 3A and 3C, but it doesn't look like there's connectors to that. It could just be how the map is shown right now. Then you can also go up top to, I think, the biggest other room, which is 3C, which could potentially still be connected to 3B. Then you could go over to 3D, which is only connected to 2B, the central chamber. Then you also have the final path you can go to, which is 2C, which was also connected to the entrance of 1A and the central chamber of 2B. But 2C is also interesting because it looks more like kind of a mazy type thing. 2C is the only thing that connects to 3E, which may be the ending of this labyrinth because it takes the most to actually get to it. But if you're an experienced World of Warcraft player and you've seen some of these work in progress maps before, and someone showed you this and didn't tell you it was labyrinths, you would probably think this was a new raid. Just based upon how many rooms there are, you would probably think, oh, there's 9 different rooms. This is a 9 boss raid that has a bunch of different directions you can go. But that's pretty much all we know about the labyrinth system. Again, it's coming with 12.1.5, so we probably won't hear more about this until we're a decent bit into midnight. But I, for one, am super excited. I hope they allow for this content to be much more difficult than Delves can be right now. And I hope, if that's the case, that they also allow for higher tiers of gear to be earned in here. Having this potential solo adventure with only you and Valeera and having it be a much more difficult end game piece of content could just be incredibly interesting. Outside of that, you can also just do this with a group of players if you really want to. So there's definitely a lot of things they could do with this that could just make it a massive new introduction into the game. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.